30,000 visitors a month within 3-4 months. And then it went 99% loss, like absolutely crushed it. I try to answer the question, is it the content that's bad, Google thinks, or is it the site? 48 hours later, they ranked number 1 at the top, or that AI overview, and they started appearing in ChatGPT in AI mode.
On today's episode, I'm joined by Mark Williams-Cook. He's the founder of AlsoAsked.com, a digital marketing director for Candour, a digital marketing agency, has 22 years of experience in the space of SEO, and he has a newsletter called Core Updates. Enjoy today's episode. I want to start with this question. So you've been in the industry for like over 20 years.
Yeah.
You run an agency called Candour.
Mm-hmm.
You built AlsoAsked, and currently you're publishing weekly the core updates, which I love, on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
So when you zoom out, how has SEO been treating you in 2025 across all these different businesses / avenues that you're working in?
Well, pretty good, because I'm still doing all those things, I guess. I really like what's happening, which is, I think, contrary to a lot of people in SEO with all the changes that are happening at the moment, just because I think we've always said, oh, SEO is changing and, SEO changes all the time. But I don't think it's actually changed that much over the last 20 years. It's basically just been technical content and links pretty much through the route of what we do. And I think this is legitimately the first time we've got a significant paradigm shift in how people are using search surfaces, whether it's Google search, YouTube, ChatGPT, Perplexity. And that's exciting because there are legitimately whole new things to learn, which is scary because obviously everyone feels like they're being left behind. I think there's a lot of FOMO, which is one reason why I started the newsletter, and because it was a newsletter that I wanted that didn't exist, just in terms of keeping up with SEO news, right? I just wanted to know, in the shortest amount of time possible, what are the things that I need to know to do my job better. I don't care if Google's testing a new font or something, and I don't really care about, internal kind of politics at various companies. I just want to know, what do I need to do my job better? And that didn't really exist. There's some other great newsletters out there, I've been a long time subscriber of Lada's SEO FOMO, which covers everything. And that really leans into, I think, Aleda's talents of apparently doing everything all the time at once. The amount she just gets through is inhuman.
The detail.
Yeah. So I need something for my simpler brain, which is just give me a list in one sentence of what is this thing, and then I can follow it. So yeah, the agency side of things is going really well. So we're fully booked at the moment. So we're a team of 25, and we don't kind of intend to grow the team anymore. So we're fully booked as we are. AlsoAsked has just been slowly growing month on month, year on year. If anything, I think it's got more popular now as people are thinking more about AI and the way people have conversations and ask questions. I mean, we should have been doing that before, really, for SEO, but people were, in some cases, kind of stuck on older methodologies. So I think the AI stuff has dragged some people into kind of modern SEO in a way. So I'm pretty happy.
I like that you touched on modern SEO. So what has changed for you, and what is working for people now? What have you been implementing in the agency and also making use of AlsoAsked to sort of shape this new modern SEO workflow?
So it's a really good question. I mean, people talk, I think, mistakenly now when they talk about AI, saying, oh, SEO is not about keywords anymore. It's about semantic relationships. But it's been that way for 10 years. Google, I think 11 years ago, was introducing things like their knowledge graph, and their kind of one-liner was, well, Google's becoming about things, not strings, which was essentially them, in layman's terms, talking about this move into this semantic era of, well, we're less bothered specifically about the exact words you use in what order, and we're more interested in concepts and things and how things relate to each other. And that has kind of grown. So how I feel SEO has changed is, I think you can now legitimately focus more on what the algorithm is aiming at rather than the algorithm itself, if that makes sense, right? So if we look way back to, if you're kind of around my age, you might have used search engines like Alta Vista and things like kind of in a very early or pre-Google era. And the biggest change that I think made Google successful was they had this PageRank invention, right? Which was essentially a way to take the power away from webmasters. So rather than say, well, I'm going to trust you for whatever list of keywords in your meta keywords that you say your website is about and rank you based on that, they're going to say, actually, I'm going to see how other websites that you don't control, how much they reference you and link to you, and use that as a proxy signal for your kind of popularity and how people like you. And I always think that, people are like really complicated, right? If you ever try and have a friendship or relationship, you're like, as you get older, you're like, wow, everyone actually really thinks differently and has different opinions on things. And when you actually think about what search engines are trying to do, which is judge quality, judge what's relevant and what's not, you probably can't get humans to agree on that half the time anyway. So trying to get a machine to do it is challenging, right? But I feel we've migrated closer to that more kind of complex assessment that people do over the last certainly 10 years. And we know Google does a lot of that by looking at aggregates of user signals. So what users are actually doing, what they're clicking on, when they're coming back to SERPs, when they're redoing searches. So I feel this means you can focus more on actually creating those good experiences, things people want, and really making them happy, versus looking at, okay, these are the metrics that search engines are using to measure. Let's try and pump those metrics up, because you can do that sometimes without actually creating the underlying quality that they're trying to capture. 10 years ago, I was buying loads of links because it really, really worked, right? And basically, it was pretty much the only way to compete. Now, as an agency, we're not buying links, but we are competing in some very competitive areas, and we're doing very, very well. I'm still aware, obviously, at the very sharp end in things like iGaming, which we don't operate in, it's still an absolute knife fight, and I'm aware of that. And you probably still would need to buy links to
Really?
yeah, like the stuff, the iGaming, because I look at the SERPs a lot, right? Because I think it's important to see what is legitimately working. I'm not blind to it. I'm not preaching. I don't care what Google says you should or shouldn't do. They're certainly not in any place to hand out moral judgments, right? And it's not the law what they say, but there's a practical business sense to aligning or not malaligning yourself with Google, right? Because if you get in their way of making money, they will steamroll you if they need to, right? But looking at iGaming SERPs, you can certainly see where the cracks in the algorithm are, because they're full of parasite hosted websites at the moment. So you can see what's working and what's not. And, you've got very big, like legitimate UK newspapers and gambling sites that have comparisons and stuff just being beaten by. I gave one example at Brighton SEO, which had just been penalized, which is why I spoke about it. But it was like it was an old school website with loads of like gov links and stuff. And basically the homepage had been repurposed to be a gambling site. And it was ranking number in the top 3 for about 16,000 casino keywords in the UK. Yeah, making a huge amount of money. And the interesting thing to me was it was about a 500 page website, and the other 499 old pages was still the old school website. All they'd done is kind of clipped off the links to it from the homepage. However, since all the other pages were still in the index, to Google as a whole, as a topic, the site still kind of looked like a school site, but it's got a page about gambling on it. So
We'll just ignore that.
Yeah, I'll let it rank.
Different entities,
But you could maybe think of a legitimate reason. Maybe it's a page on why you shouldn't gamble as a student or something but it's just things like that where it's it's obviously broken, and there's a huge amount of money to be made in the short term by by exploiting that. But again, because we're an agency, we're generally working with businesses that want to be around for the next 10, 15, 20, 100 years. Our kind of approach is, what's the next best thing to do for your business, and how do we do that in the most SEO friendly way possible? So it's SEO that is assisting the business goals. We're not just doing things for SEO reasons. Yeah.
And what have you started actually doing in your agency in the new AI era? What sort of new offerings have you serviced your clients with that was not part of your workflow before?
Sure. So I don't buy into geo as a thing. I'll just get that kind of right
You
out
have
there.
a preferred term?
Yeah. And I hate the term geo as well. I think it's ridiculous and we shouldn't call it that just because it's so confusing, because geo already has a whole bunch of other meanings, right? In English, if you Google geo, you're not getting stuff about generative engine optimization
I'm
come
just
up.
thinking of geography.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've heard AEO, answer engine optimization. I don't think that does it. I kind of like Disco, which
Disco.
was discovery something optimization. I just like it 'cause it
First
was
time I'm
Disco.
hearing it.
Yeah, I know. So let's push for that one. So yeah, but sorry, back to your question. So I think for me, when we were talking about the paradigm shift in terms of how people behave, the biggest thing that I think is going to affect marketing and brand in general is how people perceive brand, meaning that in like the 1950s, brand was what you would tell people it was. It's what you would put on billboards, on TV ads, and you'd say to people, hey, we're this brand and we're known because we're super reliable, or we do this thing really well. And everyone's like, cool. Everyone kind of got hyper connected around the early noughties. We had the internet. And now, in my opinion, brand is more what people say about you online. You don't have direct control about it anymore. You can say you're super reliable, but if your products are crap and fail all the time, that's going to come out in Trustpilot reviews, in Reddit threads, on forums, and people will Google for reviews and Google about you. And that's what exists, right? That's your brand online, which we've spent a long time working on. Where I think we are on the precipice of going is brand will become how large language models primarily understand your brand. So they are, drinking the internet dry of content legally, illegally, ethically, unethically. They're doing it. Kind of an agentic future, I think, is unavoidable because you've got a time save there for people. And if there's one clear kind of historic trend of technology, it's that people will do the thing that's the least effort for the same kind of output. You see that all manners of life. The famous one is, when you have like the path around the grass, but then you have the worn bit in the grass where everyone's cut across. It's like that technology as I see it. So we're positioning clients to think in that way, that it's important to understand how your brand is being imprinted on these language models. So what do the language models think about you? Does it align with, you've got all this lovely documentation about your brand vision, mission, your values. Are they out there and is it understood? Is it clear what type of customer you're serving, what problem you're solving? And there's different tools you can use to kind of get a grip on that now.
What are your favorites, maybe?
So I really like the approach WAIK are taking, which is what AI knows about you. So WAIKAY.io. Because again, I'm not myself a huge fan of prompt tracking for a whole bunch of reasons. I just think for the variety of prompts people are using, because a lot of the results will be personalized based on the user, based on the previous conversation. And even if they weren't, the answers that are generated are non-deterministic. It's just such an expensive, slow way to try and track visibility, if you can even legitimately call it that, because you don't know how big the universe is that you're measuring using your little measuring stick on. I really like the way that YK approach it, which is they'll do things like they'll automatically try and extract facts about your brand from the model using their knowledge graph. So they know, okay, if you're about this topic or this subject, here's in our knowledge graph all the things that we know are connected to that. That's what we're going to kind of inquire with the model about. And then you can review those facts and see if they are aligned with actually what you want to be aligned with. And if not, then you can start the kind of operation of, okay, well, is this training data? Is it something that's being surfaced through retrieval augmented generation? And if so, where is that information and how do we change it? I think that initial alignment is the long-term important thing that brands need to get on top of. At the sharp end of the stick, I've done a few talks about how our kind of keyword research process has changed now, which is essentially a workflow of taking what you might call traditional keywords, the lists of, blue running shoes and stuff like that. And we've got a process where we enrich them with persona data, use LLMs to give us suggested prompts that people might use, which is a perfect use for LLMs because of the training data they have is literally people self-identifying as those people asking those questions on like specialized forums, and then using tools to extract the information about whether that prompt is grounded, i.e. whether the model is doing a web search in the background. And if it is doing a web search in the background, you can actually extract what queries it is doing. as well.
Hmm.
So you can say, okay, for this topic, we've got these starter conversations, and then you can use things like AlsoAsked to extract like very related questions that are likely to come up in that conversation, because that's the other difference, right? Is it's a back and forth conversation. It's not like a one-shot search like traditional search. So for every topic, you'll have these maybe a few hundred, few thousand conversational pathways, and then we can automate again that process of seeing, matching up, okay, these prompts trigger these searches in Google. And then you've got your kind of list of, okay, if we want to be visible for these topics, these are the search terms we need to appear in the SERPs for. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be your website, which is the other big change, right? So SEO has traditionally been like, this is our property on the web, we need to push this property higher. When it comes to visibility in LLMs, it's like a multi-site focus. So I know if ChatGPT is doing this query, I need to appear as many times in those top 10, 20 results as I can. So if someone's doing a roundup of running shoes, I need to get in contact with their team and be like, hey, the next time you do your Christmas, New Year resolution running article, can we send you a pair of ours to review to include here? Kind of thing. So, and you can actually influence the answers really quickly, like within days of like ChatGPT and such. If it's training data, it's months and months and months of work.
And do you have any examples actually of clients that you've managed to change their rankings or their visibility in a matter of days that you can share?
Well, actually, if anyone looks on my LinkedIn, I post more fun examples of this, where we were manipulating the results for things like top UK SEO experts. And then we just made our own list that we wanted. And then we got that published on a bunch of different sites that ranked, and it changed it in ChatGPT within a day. And then the interesting side effect from that was, like, about 2 weeks ago, I got tagged in a LinkedIn post and someone was like, oh, here's the like current top SEO experts in the UK. And I commented, I was like, I know you've used AI to generate your posts because this is the exact list that we put into ChatGPT.
Love
Right.
it.
So
Full circle moment for you.
yeah. And there's a couple, there's a couple which was, so after the helpful content update as well, this is kind of related. Helpful content update obviously destroyed lots and lots of people's sites. And there was a lot of discussion around content quality at that time. And one of my hobby sites, which I found super interesting, had been like decimated by the helpful content update. So I was getting like 20, 30,000 visitors a month within 3-4 months, and then it went like 99% loss, like absolutely crushed it. So I was like, fine, whatever, it's interesting. It wasn't even monetized, it was just a kind of fun site. And then I tried to answer the question, is it the content that's bad, Google thinks, or is it the site? So we copy and pasted the content from those pages onto LinkedIn Pulse articles. And then 48 hours later, they ranked number one. They ranked in the featured snippet at the top, or the AI overview, and they started appearing in ChatGPT in AI mode. So
Wow.
the
It was the site. And that was the
outcome
bad
from
apple.
that, was that the helpful content update at least is suppressing, it's not just what you're saying, it's who's saying it. And there's loads of great examples of this, right? So the other one example we gave was, I don't know if you caught this, the Vatican website got hacked about a year and a half ago, I think it was now. And they were ranking on the first page of Google for CBD gummies because someone just put a single CBD gummy affiliate page on the Vatican website. And again, it was just a demonstration of, there's a lot of talk around like topical authority, right? And if someone can just like explain to me how the Vatican website is the topical authority on CBD gummies, I would love to hear it. But it's not. It's because Google gave it a free pass because of how trusted that site was. Same as the school example with the iGaming, right? So it gets to kind of, Google's still not great at being like, this content's really good. A lot of it leans on the site it's delivered on.
So Black Hat can kind of live on as much as people don't talk about it. There's still a lot of, and I know that's something very common in our industry that, no one really talks about these tactics anymore. But to know that they can still be exploited and there are lots of loopholes that go under the radar for Google is very interesting. So thanks for bringing that back to light.
I mean, yeah, Black Hat's has always worked, will always work. But the question is, it will work until it doesn't, right? Because all those sites will be
eventually
caught.
have its day.
So,
if you're numbered.
Yeah, if you're an affiliate, like, hey, like, fill your boots. Like, as long as you're not breaking any laws.
If you're playing with other people's companies, Yeah,
Yeah,
then
probably not the
unfortunately you
best.
can't exploit that, guys. Not anymore. I actually really want to talk about people also ask, because you've mentioned before that you have used people always ask for over a decade and even called it the manual version of AI search. When you teach someone like how to read the people always ask tree, and I know you touched on that
Hmm.
previously when you walk even the framework of how you implement this for your clients, but I want to know what are some key patterns or signals you ask them to look for? Maybe you can give some examples for our listeners out there.
So I guess the biggest mistake I see when people use people also ask data is they treat it just like a Q&A, frequently asked questions type thing, where they'll use also ask, they'll type in a topic, and then they'll be great. They'll be like, great, these are the questions we've got, so we'll just list these on the page and answer them verbatim, which I think is just a bit of a disappointing, use for the data. So the use for the data for me is it's at the point where you've decided what already you're going to write about. There's other tools, like Keywords Everywhere is a great example of how I would choose, topically what to write about, or how I would determine a site structure based on things like search volumes, terms I know people are using, and, where they're clustered, where they're split. Once I've decided, okay, we're going to write our travel guide now, and we're going to write about, a specific guide for Paris or something, to give an example. At that level, you're going to start with pretty much every keyword tool running into unhelpful volume data where it's just like 0 or 10 or whatever. And that's really common because at that level of granularity, the amount of ways people can ask the same question really explodes. It might only have 5 or 10 searches a month, but there's 100 ways to ask the same question, just word it ever so slightly differently. So there can be quite a lot of hidden search volume there. And the way that I use that PAA data is to essentially say, okay, rather than think about it as we discussed almost earlier in terms of these are keywords that I need to answer, I think about the intent of what it means that people are asking these questions. So let me give you a solid example of this. You can use PAA data at a brand level. So Revolut is a good example of this. So Revolut, if you don't listeners don't know, is one of the new kind of online challenger banks that's really easy to change currencies and quickly move money. Now, if you typed Revolut into Google and looked at the PAAs, or into Also Asked and looked at the graph, you would see the majority of questions are around things like how much money is protected in Revolut? Is Revolut legit? Is it safe to keep my money in Revolut? Is Revolut governed by the FCS or whatever? What that's telling me is that people are scared to give their money to Revolut because you're new and you're asking me to give you like all my money, right? So my message to the other teams, if I was an SEO, outside of keywords, outside of this, it's using search data for business intelligence, which is, okay, on our homepage, we need to strongly reinforce all of the like accreditations we've got, maybe, case studies, customer quotes, be very clear about how money is securely like deposited. I don't really, in that instance, care about every single specific question because all of this keyword data has a lot of time emotion behind it. And I know now from this data that people are scared when they come to the site, and it's your job to make them not scared in, whatever tools you've got available. The other side is if I'm exploring a subject, the way I think about the data is if someone is searching for whatever question I've put in, the related questions I've got are essentially what Google's saying are the next most likely things they're going to ask. And it's not optimal for Google. It doesn't align with Google's goals if you are making people go back to the SERP to look for another page that might answer the second or third one there. So it's logical, firstly, that all of this information is clustered together. But again, it's a mistake maybe even to think that you even need text to answer all these things. So say we're writing our guide for Paris and we see someone, there's a common question like, what's taller, the Eiffel Tower or Big Ben or something, just to give you a really lame example, right? I think it would be silly to be like, the Eiffel Tower is 100 and whatever meters. I would use an image for that and then maybe cluster it with the other kind of landmarks that are in the keyword data. So again, it's just about thinking, what's the best way I can satisfy this user and make it so they don't need to leave the site. The other really interesting thing to finish on about this data that's always overlooked is, firstly, there's no other source of keyword data that I'm aware of that updates as quickly as PAA data. When we had elections in the UK, within hours of kind of mainstream news breaking about specific politicians, the questions had changed on Google's PAAs in reaction to how people were searching and interacting with search. One of the ways we use PAA data is if you use Screaming Frog as a tool, one of the custom JavaScripts that comes with Screaming Frog is AlsoAsked. It's an AlsoAsked and ChatGPT connector, and you can automatically crawl your content. It will analyze your content against the PAA questions, and it will highlight which questions you have not answered. This can be helpful because you can check 1,000 pages of content for if the intent has shifted, because that, again, is a mistake people make in that they do their keyword research, write their article, and then they think it's done. But human interest kind of migrates over time. COVID is a really interesting example about this. In early COVID, lots of the searches were around coronavirus, and because that's what most people called it then, and people were really interested in what are the symptoms and all this now. But that cloud of kind of questions now has completely changed, and it changed into basically, I've got COVID, when can I go outside again? Like, what's the minimum legal time for me just to ignore it and carry on with my life kind of thing? So this exists throughout this kind of intent graph, which is, okay, we've got content, but is it matching what the current zeitgeist is? And that's, I think, again, where people get muddled with freshness. Because it doesn't matter if it was published 10 minutes ago or a year ago. What matters is that it's on point for the actual intent. And obviously, when people update stuff, it's more likely to be that way.
And what is the cadence then that you do to check this freshness to see if the search intent is still aligned? Because you said it could be relevant 5 minutes ago or a year ago and still maintain its freshness if, people have not moved on to another, to having another sentiment around it.
Yeah.
So what cadence do you sort of abide by when checking in on your best performing content or like
So when we are making content strategies for clients, we'll normally delineate between things that are, for instance, like true evergreen type content, and we'll have a scale on things that are obviously more the query deserves freshness. We'll also prioritize based on where the clicks are or are not occurring. So generally what we'd look for on a monthly basis as we're doing reporting is just across our clients and their topics if they're seeing any click decay, because click decay is normally a sign that, interest is waning because rankings are dropping. And then that can be a time at which we sort of check back in and say, well, is it still aligned, or what is the reason for this? And it's particularly interesting now thinking about this QDF, this query deserves freshness, because the stuff that is truly evergreen is the stuff that from an AI point of view isn't going to be triggering searches. So this is the real long-term kind of content anyway. So I think that's one maybe strategic thing that's changed over the last few years, which is there's more short, medium term ROI in focusing on content that requires freshness, because we know all these AI platforms are going to have to do searches for it. And then once they've collected their shortlist, they're heavily biased on published date as well. That's very, very apparent. So that's, I guess, something that has been shifted. And I think that's a good thing, right? Because there's only so many, lasagna recipes that we need as a species. It's cool
but
that
once you're in there already, you're kind of like, it's tenfold for you, right? So you sort of have to play the game in positioning yourself and creating that fresh content, but then package it in a way that it can last and be used evergreen by the LLMs. So get in there first, and then you're good if your content's good enough. So how long does your content team then spend in creating these pieces for your clients? This sounds quite loaded, right? Like going through the PAAs, and also we haven't even touched on query fan out. There's so many different, data points to kind of bring together and create content. So what kind of content strategy advice, maybe your top 3 practical advice that you can give SEOs out there?
So interestingly, we don't do that much content creation at Candour. And the reason is genuinely, I think that there is that gap between, I don't want people like writing for SEO. I don't want people just answering lists of questions, because you're in high danger of just repeating what's already out there, which has always been dangerous, but now more so than ever in terms of originality. So the process I would recommend people to take, and has been really fruitful, is, which will be popular because it uses some AI, is to do your kind of content research keyword research, your briefs as usual. So you have like a brief for, okay, we've identified this is a thing that we want to write about, and these are the kind of questions. Now, a classic problem would be, do you hire a writer to write about that and they do research, which unfortunately, unless they are an expert themselves, normally means they just go and Google things or search on ChatGPT, which then you're in danger of just recycling stuff, or you try and give it to an actual expert. The problem there is lots of actual subject matter experts are not good writers. And if you give them a brief that has questions on, you generally just get verbatim answers to the questions you've given. So it's a bit dry. So what we found actually works really well is you have your kind of outline, your list of questions, and then you do kind of what we're doing now, which is you have a more open conversation with that expert about the topic, and you're guided by your own questions. But you kind of let them lead the conversation because most people are very comfortable just having a one-to-one kind of chat like this. Then you use AI to take that transcript and pull it into a first draft. And then it goes through the actual editing process where someone aligns it, with the tone of voice and the format exactly it needs to be. But I found that's so much faster and more effective for producing actually good content with first person perspectives, with things maybe that haven't been said before, because you're not biasing the writer too much with the questions. You're letting them lead with their expertise.
Yeah, that's very interesting workaround. And it's a human in the loop, but also having an expert in the loop, but then, optimizing it with AI. And it sounds like the full package. You're making use of everyone.
It's better than just telling ChatGPT to write the article for sure.
Exactly. Exactly. And it has value, right? And then it's also a unique piece of content that you are creating.
Yeah. The great thing about video is you can work downwards from it as well. So, if they've got a nice bit of lighting, you can make bits for the social media team if there's interesting, like 10-second quotes there. You can make bits of audio for kind of podcasts or whatever you need to from that. It's a really versatile format. You can't work the other way up, right? You can't write the content and then do a social media thing from it.
For sure. And I want to jump ship a bit to
Okay.
back to AlsoAsked, and because you've actually posted on Google about changing things temporarily, breaking. Google changes
Yes.
things all the time, and they have been breaking AlsoAsked. I know you guys had a little bit of a hiccup this week.
It's been a fun couple of days.
It's all good, part and parcel of having a SaaS tool that's reliant on Google. We understand. So I wanted to ask, what has that taught you about building on top of search features that you do not have control on, and how do you sort of stress test your business risks, around this?
Yeah. So for those that don't, for a little context, I guess, for listeners, a couple of days ago, it appears Google has taken probably their third step in making it a lot more difficult for, I think, AI platforms to scrape their answers. Their previous two kind of big changes didn't affect us at all because it didn't affect the way we were doing things. This one did specifically with things like AI generated answers. So Google's got kind of a lot more validation steps now to be able to kind of get that data. So it's a lot harder for scrapers. In answer to your question about building on top of like search features that we don't have control over, I would argue that's kind of our value proposition, because there's no API for this incredibly valuable data. It just doesn't exist. It's not like, Google suggests like the answer to the public data. That's, there's an API there and anyone can tap into it fairly easily, especially now we can vibe code stuff, right? But you would be very hard pressed to vibe code like a AlsoAsked type SaaS because of the complexity of what needs to be done with Google. So, we've essentially built our own API on top of their data that's accessible live. It works asynchronously. It will do things like simulate actual clicks on the PAAs, which is really important because you get different results if you click on a PAA versus re-Googling the question, because it represents a different starting point of knowledge, which Google actually has patents around for, which is Google has patents around trying to figure out essentially how much a user knows about a subject by their search query. So if you do a kind of fairly basic layman query about a subject and then you click on some of the PAA questions, Google's still going to assume you're kind of a beginner. Whereas if you're trying to explore PAAs, which is what a lot of other tools that save the data do, by getting the first 4 questions and then kind of just re-Googling each of those questions to get another 4 answers, you'll have like a different starting position then. So you get different end questions, which breaks the whole kind of intent thing. The other, I guess, value proposition of building on top of those features is we do things like allow people to customize, for instance, what city they're doing the search from. So if you do a search from the US for something like food trucks, you'll see it's completely customized or completely not personalized, but they're geo-specific, the questions to the city you're in. And especially for countries like the US that are so massive, there's huge cultural differences about what people care about and what questions they have in the north and the south and the east and the west. So there isn't really, I guess, I haven't worried about it too much about this problem, because the problem is my business. Basically, it's like we have to just figure out. This has probably been I'd say the trickiest hurdle Google's put up with. So that's taken us pretty much the best part of a day and a half to get back online with basic functionality. And there's probably, I would hope, another 24 hours or so work before we're back to where we were, which is a small, we're doing millions of searches a month. So it's a fairly small drop in the bucket. But yeah, the SaaS tool thing. So AlsoAsked was my first proper like SaaS tool, that's, scaled to thousands of users and millions of searches. And I would just say, I guess, that I thought it would be complicated, but it's always more complicated than you even think it's going to be. There's always some other problem you hadn't thought about or some other challenge, which has made it fun. But
Nice.
yeah.
And do you see yourself getting into AI brand visibility? Is
That's
that
a good
something
question.
do you want to jump into that race?
I
What else are you cooking?
I don't think so. I don't think so for me at the minute. I mean, just because there's a few not established, there's a few, I guess, first to market people with tens of millions in funding. I think a few people have taken the approach that maybe I would have. So like Dixon Jones from Wayk. Essentially what he's built is probably very similar to if I had a go at it, what I would do it. So I just kind of use his tool and talk to him about it and give him feedback and, try and get him to do the development that I want for it. But no, I have, between e-commerce business, between training course, between conferences, between agency, between AlsoAsked, my plate's kind of full for anything else.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I actually want to ask, before we jump into a rapid fire round, what sort of skills do you recommend SEOs out there prepare themselves with, given
Mhm.
that you can be overwhelmed with, from the outside looking in,
Mhm.
it's very messy what's going on in the industry, right? And
Yep.
people are quite scared with all the changes that are happening. What would you the 2 skills that you would prioritize building over the next year or so for budding SEOs out there, anyone
I
trying to
mean,
survive the marketing world?
in terms of knowledge, I would just spend some time learning how LLMs work. So there's a YouTube video by someone called Andre Karpathy, which he's done like a 3.5 hour, very, very cool introduction into how large language models are built, how they generate answers. And I'm always a fan of learning how something works rather than what you should be doing. Because if you understand how it works, you can make your own what, you can come up with your own ideas, and it also makes you aware of the sharp edges. So I see people making pretty grievous mistakes, in my opinion, with SEO because they're using large language models for inappropriate tasks where they will cause problems. So having that understanding of how they're actually working can insulate you from that. And again, this probably sounds super basic, but I would still spend time again learning the basics of, do you understand how information retrieval systems like Google are crawling the web, how they are gathering and queuing URLs, how they are rendering pages, how can you explain how PageRank works? It's still fundamental. The biggest lever in SEO still is probably the links that come out the end, right? They still use PageRank. We still know that. There's part of this outside your control with things like user signals, but in my opinion, if you're doing SEO, those things should be the basis that everything else is built upon.
I want to ask you very quickly, what are the worst ways that people are making use of LLMs, SEOs that are how
Take your pick.
how are they messing about? What has been the most ridiculous thing you have heard someone use it for?
All sorts. So I think you commonly see people saying that, oh, you can do like a $10,000 technical SEO audit on a website with ChatGPT, you just tell it to be like, you've got 10 years experience in SEO, go and do this audit. And it's just, it's mind boggling, really. It can't do half the stuff it needs to do. Even basic stuff like, for instance, you can use LLMs to help you generate something like schema, right? But it will get it wrong sometimes. It will just make up properties that don't exist. It will hallucinate because that's what LLMs do, right? So when you've got a task that needs to be repeated across thousands of pages, and a core tenet of that task is it needs to be correct every time, then you can't use an LLM to do it because it will be wrong some of the time. So we've got established tools for this already. That we've got great tools like SitePulp. It's got a cloud version. It's an absolutely amazing auditing tool. And even that's not a full SEO audit. That just gives you hints on what's going on, and then you actually need to look at the site and think about it and put it together. So, that's ridiculous. I think keyword research in LLMs, if you're doing it for things like Google, is ridiculous. I've seen people prioritize what to work on because they've got search volumes from ChatGPT. And unless you are paying for and using something like the Ahrefs MCP, their service to do that, it doesn't have access to that data. It's just making it up, and and people are paying for this, right? And to me, it's just like, I can't think of a even vaguely polite way to describe it. It's just grifting to me. It's just complete grift.
I feel like everyone's doing it for a great LinkedIn post,
Well, this is the danger, right? Because it's so attractive to think that there is, in anything in life, right? If someone gives you such a simple solution, you're like, oh, thank goodness, this was really stressing me out. I thought this could be really hard. And this person's come with this great solution, and you have a bias. Yeah, you don't want to question it because you want it to be true. And I always think that's one of the most dangerous things. You need to be really careful of things. Be honest with yourself that you want to be true, because you're probably not being critical enough. My point of view is always, if it's that good, it can't be true. It's too good to be true.
Fair enough. I think this is a great segue to the first question in my rapid fire round, which is, what's the strangest / most interesting thing you've used for an LLM for?
Define interesting. For us, whether it's a business thing, whether I guess you'd find it interesting, we use them to, we do loads of newsjacking stuff, pump in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories every hour into a local LLM that basically uses a Google sheet that we have a list of client relevant topics we're interested in, and it determines if the story is about that, and if so, automatically posts it to our Slacks. We become aware of stories within normally an hour of being published, so we can do our kind of client reaction to them. So that's been, I think that's interesting myself. Everyone else at the Christmas table is probably going to be really bored when I explain it to them, but I find it interesting.
They're probably talking about how they've automated, I don't know, chores at home or something like that. I had a previous guest who was talking about how he made use of the LLM to take pictures. Alex Moss, actually, from Yoast.
I know Alex, yeah.
Yeah, and how he took pictures of his old Lego and got the LLM to, figure out how to build this model so that he can use it with his kid, like his old school Legos. Yes, so that was a very cute use case. Yours is a very practical one that our listeners would appreciate. So if it does not get any love around the Christmas table, it's definitely going to be very good. What's your favorite LLM?
So the one I use the most, I guess, is, although it's an amalgamation of a few, is Perplexity. So that's kind of my default search for a lot of stuff at the moment.
And what's one SEO task you never want to do manually again?
URL migrations. So mapping URLs, old to new.
What's your most overhyped SEO trend in the AI era?
Vector embeddings, for sure.
You want to expand on that? Tell me why you think it's
just stuff like, vector embeddings, basically turning stuff into numerical representations of what they are. So things like saying that using vector embeddings to decide how to internally link a site automatically, I don't buy it. You're essentially arguing that the best thing to link to is a page that is the most similar to the one you're on. Like, why? The best thing to link to is the thing that the user probably wants next, which may have some correlation to what is similar, but it's not necessarily what you'd want to do. So things like that for me are very shiny toys. We've got all this kind of tech now that makes it easy to do stuff like that.
And also just having that technical term already is like a woo-woo thing, right? But
Yeah.
in reality, it's not as easily applied. And that's why I wanted to kind of dig deeper into why you said that. What's one AI feature or product you wish existed?
Actual AI.
Actual, okay,
Well,
fair.
just I mean, yeah, I mean, AGI would be really cool, right? I think it sucks that a lot of these LLMs use terms like reasoning and thinking, which anthropomorphizes what they're doing because they're not doing that in any way that we would consider them to be doing that. And then, they're not intelligent and they hallucinate. And I think it's really interesting that it got called hallucination as well. And I can only assume this is because when they have board meetings with people that put tens or hundreds of billions of dollars into a project, they don't want to hear it produces bullshit 15% of the time. Like, it's much more palatable to say, oh, it hallucinates.
Hallucinates.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is specifically for LLMs, part of AI, which is also not the whole of AI, which is
No,
what
absolutely. So
massive.
actually, I love that you've said this. So this is like this is like a bugbear of mine, right? Which is that I've really been into like I did my first machine learning qualification, I think like 9 years ago. Like I've been into AI for a long time, and I've been telling people for years like AI is going to be great, it's going to change the world. And now we've got generative AI, and it's all anyone talks about. And when people say AI, 59% of people are talking about Gen AI and ignoring all the other cool stuff that has been used for years in AI, and also at the same time overhyping Gen AI. So I'm 100% on with it. And I just assumed the question was like, what do you want to see from Gen AI? Okay, here you go. So in terms of Gen AI, what I'd love to see is a good solution to somehow balance out the bias from the training data. So when I go to Midjourney and I say, make me a picture of a doctor, it's not some fuddly old white guy. And then when I say generate a picture of a nurse, it's not some, someone with like a low cut nurse top on woman. Like that would be great as well, because if people start actually leaning on LLMs for content generation, for business intelligence, for all this stuff, to me, how can you have a progressive society based on retroactive data?
Lack of diversity, representation, and also like, yeah.
And it's going to be perpetuated. So it's like, for me, there's like a massive alignment issue there. So fix the alignment issue before you force all the AI down my throat, please.
Agreed. Yes, Mark Williams for AI president. That is a great speech. Love it. Favorite tool you didn't expect to love?
I'm going to give it to Wayk for that. I was skeptical about a lot of AI tools, and I use it a lot now. And I just want to point out I'm not paid by them because I've been very complimentary about them, but genuinely they have really impressed me. But you can buy me a pint, Dixon, if you want next time you see me.
Nice. Make the tool cater to you and you'll keep talking
Exactly.
about
Yeah, I'll
it.
whisper in
That's
his
all
ear.
you want. Get free, free will over any future product, like a feature request. If AI vanishes tomorrow or turns too costly, which part of your workflow will break first?
None of it, really, I don't think. Maybe a few that are like, so we use AI in a very supportive kind of role. And so things I said, like going through some of the legwork stuff, but nothing's going to break because we'll just immediately go back to doing what we were doing before, but probably just be a lot happier, I guess.
Happier without AI?
Yeah, right. I know, crazy. I liked the internet before AI. So, I liked it when
No.
it was a bit more weird.
We can go through a whole episode on why this is the case, because you have a background in machine learning and now you're like, let's go back to how things were before. I'm happy
Just the
doing the manual
Just the Gen AI stuff, right? It was like, yeah.
that.
I liked the old internet.
One word, and this is the final question, one word to describe the future of us.
Long.
Agreed. We'll leave it as that at that. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time. I really appreciate having
It's been
you
really
on.
fun. It's been a pleasure.
Apologize for that. You
No
see, I'm
worries.
still a rookie.
No worries.
But yes, sorry about that, Mark. I got too excited and wanted to talk to you off record. But please shout out where the people can find you. How can they keep in touch with what you're doing and what projects you're currently working on?
So I guess I'm most active on LinkedIn, and you can find me just by searching for Mark Williams Cook. I think I'm actually the only Mark Williams Cook on the internet. So for better or for worse, it's pretty easy to find me. I'm on Blue Sky as well now. So I left Twitter X like a year or so ago. That's more just random musings, not necessarily about SEO. To kind of keep up with SEO stuff, I have, that you kindly mentioned earlier, our newsletter, which is coreupdates.com, which is free. And every week we send out 5 SEO tips. We send out the kind of bullet point of SEO news, and we have a deep dive podcast, normally with a guest as well, every week. But apart from that, it's normally LinkedIn I post on. I've already sorted out some conferences for next year. So if anyone does want to say hi in person, that would be great. So apart from doing talks, I'm actually quite shy. If you see me at a conference, I generally just kind of stand around and hope people will talk to me. So not being aloof, just come and say hi, and I'll immediately be your best friend, and we'll chat, and it'll be great. But yeah.
Love that.